Gundersen, and I worked both in TV, radio, and film. So really kind of different media channels experience, and also uh, quite a lot of animation. And now, in the last few years, working a lot in augmented reality, and see this combination of augmented reality and artificial intelligence as a super interesting way of expressing storytelling in using new tools. So very excited about what's going on in the world at the moment. It's also a bit scary, but nothing good comes out of just nowhere. So there is this situation at the moment that I think maybe we'll have a chance to talk a little bit about as we move forward in this class. But it is truly, I would just say personally, since I first experienced the internet a long time ago, I would say this is the first, I mean, this is the biggest thing that I feel has happened to the world in the digital domain since at least the introduction of the internet. So I think I call it a logarithmic dragon. It moves us all around in a very unpredictable way. So we wake up the next morning and something new and incredible has happened in this space, and it is done the right way. It is a fantastic tool for storytelling. Then that's what excites me about the moment we live in.
These guys had already seen the PAL. Of course, they heard the stories that we had in building in under 10 weeks a concept using a story, beginning, middle, and end. And we've already seen some of your wonderful Christmas carol singers. Device was in the picture right around November, wasn't it? They've already seen voluntaries that have experience with AR and picture sales platforms, and very much looking forward to the possibility of creating a tour together as part of this program.
Very good. And Gareth, thank you for this opportunity again. And I'm wondering, we were talking about both maybe sharing some thoughts of, different media types that I've been working on over the years, and how storytelling, how different media can actually promote storytelling. What are the pros and cons, etc., etc., and maybe moving from there onto where we are today. And then separate from that, also talk a little bit about Norse mythology, and so if that makes sense. And I think that also you're suggesting, if I understand correctly, that we can have a little kind of Q&A also, maybe towards the second half of this class. It's coming to the end of your day today, so but does that make sense?
Yeah, no, that's great. I think we can start with the story of the different media, storytelling through the different media. We've also talked a lot of mythology this week, just as and we're really interested. We had touched on Norse mythology, so your structure sounds great, but we're happy to jump in at any.
Yeah. Okay, very good. So I think what I'd like to start is just my own observation. Coming from Norway, which is not the center of the universe in that sense, right? It's a small country up there in the north. If you look at how storytelling has taken place, let's say in the last 100 years, right? You have had a very strong domination of US Hollywood-centric machine. Many good things to be said about it, but it's been very dominated by that territory, if you like. And I think that what we've seen lately, just moved from there until now, is a democratization, liberalization of the actual storytelling tools that allows you and us to really express ourselves on a global stage without having to have $100 million in the bank. And I think the barriers that you have seen, I mean, not deliberately set there, but that you have seen, for example, in movie production over the decades, is kind of making it impossible for lots of creative people I'm not saying everyone should make movies, for example, but I'm just saying that it's made it very, very hard to express, for example, yourself as, for example, a movie producer or director, on and get your stories out onto the global stage. Now you can say, what's the point? You know, if you have a local audience, that's absolutely fine too. The art, the creation part is unaffected by the audience, if you like. But in many cases, it is inspiring to address a global scene. And I think that back again, from just from the media point of view, today an animated feature from either, for example, Pixar or DreamWorks can cost upwards to $200 million to make, US dollars, right? And then another 100 million US dollars to market that around the world. That's a very, very big sum of money, right? To create a Frozen 3 or whatever it might be. Uh, and I think what is the absolute opposite of that? Instead of having 200 people in a big building somewhere in Burbank, California, to sit together, create these wonderful, wonderful. How about having 100 people, 100 countries creating the same story for a fraction of the cost, using new methods that are now available to us? And you will experience that, I believe, some of these various technologies that are now available to make it possible for talented people around the world to come together and jointly create fantastic stories, and also the ability to distribute that on a global stage. So I see the shift here is maybe bigger than we can actually fathom at the moment, but this is what I call the liberalization of creating stories for a global stage. So for me, who have actually been around for a while, I would say that, and I was working out of Hollywood for 8 years, not very long, because I felt it was a never-ending story of just sort of running around in circles like a little mouse, you know, in a spinning wheel. And then suddenly now seeing the opportunity to, with collaboration tools, to create stories for a fraction of the cost, but still with very high quality and addressable on a global stage. So if I were to just sort of summarize, at least my life and my experience, that to me is an incredible gateway into the very near future. So that's where kind of I start my journey, if you like, today, in that looking into that future of network-based, collaborative, creative work. Does that make sense for you guys on your end? And do you have any questions and comments before we move on?
I think, yeah, we're really talking about the future of storytelling, right? Coming from a world of film, you having worked in Hollywood, but then also locally in Norway. And it's really about the opportunity. There's never been a better time to be a storyteller, really. Because unlike in Hollywood days, if I can just elaborate a little bit from what we talked about this week, we talked about traditional media being film, television, radio, and how in the last 15, 20 years, thanks to the internet, the ability to access new audiences has never been greater before. And I think there's a great opportunity here, Central Australia, where the First Nation storyteller, the first storytelling culture in the world, has now an ability to reach audiences thanks to some of this technology, and that's the future.
Exactly. And I think, if I may just add another observation on the movie side of things, you see all these superhero movies that's come out from Marvel and DC Comics in the last, let's say, 20 years, right? Now, what you see in the US is a fatigue related to these superhero stories, because many of them are so similar to the one that was just out, that seemed to have lost a little bit of interest in it, because when a big machine like Hollywood sees that, okay, and I can understand, now we make $1 million on a particular Superman 4 or whatever it might be, let's make five more, right? Until people are so sick and tired of it that they don't want to see it anymore. So I think the ability to also go back to the roots of storytelling, of actually sharing a hero's journey, like it was originally communicated from mother to daughter and father to son. I think there is a great opportunity to also get back the originality of stories, right? Just, instead of having it sort of now being the least common denominator that you see in of films, for example, about superheroes. And by the way, a hero is not necessarily always a superhero. A hero can be a person, of course, that is going through some difficulties and coming out of those difficulties, and gaining knowledge, experience, and moving on to triumph. So I think also that's a very important aspect of the hero's journey. That it doesn't have to be super spectacular, fantastic something. It can also be, about a little girl that is on a quest and needs to find her long lost friend. That indeed is a movie that I'm involved in at the moment with gentleman Ralph Guggenheim, that you also met right before the end of last year. So I think a superhero can be a 9-year-old girl. Doesn't have to be, like a Batman kind of thing. And I think that what maybe the world coming back to, realizing that the story of a superhero can be a human story as well. So the combination of maybe a certain hardness of the big Hollywood machine at $300 million, combined with the fact that these stories seem to be a little bit contrived. Some of them are great, by the way. I mean, I'm just sort of making a kind of talking in big letters here a little bit. You then now see, if you go back to your roots, if we go back to even Norway, we have a long tradition. It's not as long as yours, but we've been around for 2,000 years up here as well. And just to illustrate what I'm saying here, think about the Vikings. I'm sure you've all seen a few of these movies lately. I mean, kind of funny because I worked on a Viking story in California, actually, about when I was very young, about 45 years ago, and no one was interested in that at that time, right? No one, because Vikings, no, that was something outdated or not interested, etc., etc. And and then sorry, and then Hollywood about 10, 15 years ago say, hey, that's undiscovered territory. Sometimes it feels a little bit weird that those Americans over there is kind of stealing our own culture and our own myths and putting it through their machine, and out comes something that sometimes is good and sometimes not so good. And I think that with your 40,000 year history that you have to can draw on, right? I mean, what an incredible repository and of stories that the world would love to hear and love to see and experience. And that's where I'm coming back again to this thing of the possibilities are now there with very simple tools that are so incredibly powerful. So, but I'm just sharing that on a kind of on a personal level as well. That seeing all these movies about Norse mythology and something so ridiculously stupid, so completely different from our own mythology and history, that you just have to laugh, right? But then it's through the machine, it somehow works. So I think that to summarize this little segment here, I would say is that the combination of the simple tools that are now available both in production and distribution, combined with what I would call a certain fatigue in the Hollywood machinery of 4595, I think allows, and also the observation of the superhero be a 9-year-old girl. It should be, and offering stories that are not polished to such an extent that they're unrecognizable from their roots, right? I think that to me offers a really, really great opportunity for how we can see storytelling going forward.
If I may share some of our learnings just in the, the 2 weeks we've been together, some of the amazing results in this, maker creator space has been that collectively we've found, first of all, individual storytelling has been done through tactile arts, soon to move to digital, the self-portraits you've seen. What we found is that to go together on a journey, two people, two friends, if you like, out on country, and then third, the group stories, of which we just finished another one, by the way. The point I'm making, actually, between these different modalities of storytelling that we've done is that there is a mythic imagination that is alive and well in all of us. And sometimes we reference to our cultural identity through them. But in other times, and what has been amazing, even in something we just completed here, I wish we could take a picture of it, but we've created a mythology, around the space that we are, all up on the back wall. Some of these are touch points to the dream time, Rainbow Serpent being a creation story. But what we have done even together, 10 of us, is that we can access a mythic imagination at any time to tell stories with a few structural points, that whether the hero's journey or the 7 points of storytelling that Aristotle has elaborated many moons ago. So I think it's a great point you're making, Hawk, because the future belongs to the storytellers who are able to use this technology, access their mythic imagination, and distribute it to audiences around the world.
Exactly. And what I'm excited about is the fact that I think, sorry, it's cold up here in the north, that I can tell.
A lot of snow, I've heard too.
Oh man,
it's made from page news. Make sure you have a glass of water. Yeah,
I can just share with you one moment out the window here, so you see what it's pitch dark. It's pitch dark, so you won't see much.
Literally, it's frozen. Frozen.
It's totally frozen, that's for sure.
Thank you for getting up early for us. We do appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem. So, but I'm saying that it's this is also what makes storytelling so interesting, because the geography, of course, plays a very, very important part of how our ancestors managed to survive, right? And I think that is also adding. You mentioned the word frozen there, and it's kind of adding a dimension to the stories, right? Because before the cars and the digital world took over, it was a fight for survival, right? Whether it was in the heat of a desert or up here in the north where it could be minus 40 degrees, and that's also a very important part, how the geography plays an important role in rooting stories, in creating the stories in and of itself, or inspired by what the surroundings we live in. And
No, I was just going to add to that on the frozen, because it relates to Norway. Is that I heard, I learned this in Hong Kong, Disneyland of all places, because Disney has been such a machine of mythology, I guess, for over 100 years now. But
Yeah.
with Frozen, which is a relatively new but very, very popular title,
Yeah.
that they actually went to Norway to do a lot of the research around the landscapes that appear in Frozen, of which
Yes.
they reinvented the Disney castle as a frozen castle.
That's exactly right. And just a little side note on that, Frozen, they claim, was based on a fairy tale by this Danish writer, Hans Christian Andersen. And there again, you see maybe a successful, I mean, it was $1 billion plus franchise, of where Disney then takes something, from over there in Europe, in Northern Europe, and puts it through their sausage factory, and out comes something, of course, quite compelling, but still very, very far from, let's say, the original fairy tale in this case, right? So, so I think that's back again to what I'm saying a moment ago. To I think there is a great opportunity to 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 start the hero's journey, the storytelling in going back again to what was there before all this digital um, noise came around, and really use that as a basis or an inspiration for expressing these wonderful mythical stories in a new domain. I see a real great opportunity here to do that, and so I think basically what the moment we're in now allows us also to slightly alter the way a visual expression can be created, presented, right? So I don't know if you've seen, but just lately, even in the big Hollywood machine, you've seen Across the Spider-Verse. I don't know if anyone of you have seen that movie. Yeah, exactly. Now you would recall that that's a very different expression visually, for example, from Frozen, right? It has a more old-fashioned drawing kind of feeling to it. And if you think about the the tool sets that, as we now talk about, that are available, um, I think that there's also an opportunity to use new forms of visual tool sets that people may enjoy, but are slightly different from traditional way of expressing something visually. If you take, for example, the anime tradition, really traveled across the world, that's only, yeah, I mean, in a big way, it's maybe only 20 years old, right? So it may have roots in Japan that goes beyond 50 years. Just in the last 15 years that has become a world phenomenon. Now, that's a very different style from the style, for example, but still very, and, very appealing. And I think that in terms of also what the AI tools can do now, allows for some really, really great opportunities. And Gareth, if it's all right with you, I'd like to just sort of maybe dive a little bit into that, if that makes sense.
Of course, yeah, no, we're looking forward to learning all these tools in the next few weeks.
Exactly.
So we're looking forward to it because it's such a hot topic this year, isn't it? How
Yes,
AI and animation are going to combine.
that's right. So basically, I think we've all experienced. I'm sure you've all tried, DAL E or Midjourney or ChatGPT and all those other tool sets, right? And
Yeah.
in a way, exactly what I think we can see as a trend is that we're not very far away from where you can say, you know, create a 3D character for me, a 9-year-old girl going on a journey. Should have a red coat, short hair, certain features, etc., etc., and boom, there is that 3D character. We're not there quite yet, but we are there with a two-dimensional picture of that girl, for example. And we're also there now, where, as I'm sure you know, make that girl move for about 3, 4, 5 seconds in a relatively believable way. And then, of course, the backgrounds are already there. Maybe not exactly what you like, but you can reiterate and you can very quickly get to the point where you get something that you like. I'm involved with one artist at the moment that is using in a very smart way to create a character, or actually several characters, based on models that was originally made in clay, and from clay onto three-dimensional old school Maya um, files. I mean, and from there, using Midjourney, EID, and DALI and other tools to refine the character. So the artist, one artist had originally created these characters in clay and then onto Maya, but then using these 2, 3 visual tool sets to and then adding your own artistic talents and feelings and emotions into the character and get to a fantastic end result. So, and that's something that would probably have taken a small group of artists uh, months to do, that maybe can now be done in days. And if you then think about also tools that are already out now, where you make a little drawing, right, of a, let's say, a little cupboard or something in black and white, just made drawing. You push the button, and out comes not only a two-dimensional, wonderful 5 examples of that cupboard, but also a three-dimensional, maybe at the moment low resolution, not so perfect, but very soon you get to that point. So what does that tell you? Going back again to the $200 million production of a quote unquote Hollywood movie. If you can actually reduce by to 1%, or maybe even way beyond that, cost of creating the props, of creating the landscapes, where you can now use, for example, Unity, the number one visual game engine in the world, or Unreal, which is a higher quality, but maybe slightly less number of users, but that doesn't matter. You have two incredible tools. If you can use that for backgrounds, right, and you can actually start drawing things in 2D that you can convert to 3D, and you have character creation done, what you talked about a moment ago. Well, when you put these things together, you're starting to see a kind of a unbelievable new opportunity of 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 making things happen, as opposed to, as an artist, right, always being a little bit frustrated. You'd love to do, you see something, you can say, hey, I can do that, and I can do it better. There are these walls will not allow you to do it. Now, so I see these tools that you also over the next 10 to 12 weeks will experience are actually, I'm sure you've done, many of you, or all of you have done many of the things already. I don't think I'm saying anything new, but what I am saying is that these tools combined, I think it's very important to try to see how far can we take that in terms of the stories you want to tell, in terms of actually creating uh, new, new wonderful experiences. And if I may, I also want to add to this thing we talked about a moment ago in terms of the collaborative aspects, right? Because it's also good to make a living. And I think that what we see is also the opportunity to connect with other talents around the world in a network-based, let's say, collaborative situation, to then be part of bigger projects. And there are already several of them around that actually is doing some of this. personally, I'm involved in such a project right now, where we have people from around the world that are working on uh, putting together an animation feature film, pretty much using some of these tools that I just talked about. And I think that of course, when you're close to something you're creating yourself, right, you feel proud of what you're doing. But I would truly say that what we're bringing out, and this is also Ralph Guggenheim, who you met for Christmas, is involved. Um, is really what I would say is it's going to be a great film, and it's using, as I said, some of these tools and with great results. So basically, again, on the one hand, an opportunity to use these tools to express yourself, but also, I believe, the possibility of connecting with others and even making a livelihood from this, uh, because there are now many projects around the world seeking talent, and there are many platforms as well that is connecting people with talent to projects that are alive around the world. And this is, of course, not something new as of yesterday, but I would say in the last 5 to 10 years, this has really also become another way of working remotely and yet working jointly on creating, for example, visual stories. So that's probably the next thing I wanted to point out: the combination of these very compelling tools and what we're seeing. I call it, as I said, a logarithmic dragon. It's just taking us around the world now in an incredible speed. I'm looking at the dragon behind me here, a snake-formed character, and that's the way I see it. How is this creature moving? Who knows, right? But it's gaining strength by the second, and I think that for you as well, to be able in these next few weeks, which I think is an incredible opportunity really for all of us, to really try to understand where this creature is taking us, is really fascinating in the realm of storytelling.
Mm. Absolutely. And Ash, maybe you have some news just to share or build a bridge. There is a mythic imagination here that has been here that is older than the Middle East. And it's out in those windows that you can see outside the studio.
Yeah.
And it's in our minds and it's in our hearts, as we've shared even in these last 2 weeks. So it's completely conceivable that, within a matter of months, if not weeks, that we are able to tell stories of this green time and share them with the world. What that looks like and how that's shaped is actually defined by you. But what we're here to do is to help build a bridge, to understand how the technology works, to understand the basics of storytelling, just to then engage your mythic imagination and give you the tools to be able to tell those stories. And one small way we've agreed to do that is around the cultural tour, which over a year ago was laid out, thanks to Picture Tale and some of the resources we've shared. So I just want to re-emphasize what Hawk's saying, and that this is a great opportunity. And you are some of the first in Australia, if not the world, to be given some of these tools in coming weeks. And even yesterday, I might add that these guys made a great contribution to the next comic that is going to be scheduled for next year, and some stories that we want to engage with having a couple of Indigenous characters in our next stage. So these are the opportunities for all of us, and it all starts with creativity.
Yeah, exactly.
That's all I have. But Ash, do you have a view? Would you like to ask Hawk something?
Yeah, Hawk, I wanted to ask, why do you think a lot of the, I guess, what we call dreamtime stories in Aboriginal culture in Australia, I don't think we've ever really seen it out on the big screen? And do you think there's a reason for that? Do you think people are not interested in it, or people would be interested in it, but
Yeah.
it's just out there yet?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think that a story, is like a diamond, right? You polish it, and it becomes this shining, wonderful experience. Um, what I was talking about originally, or in the start of this conversation or this class now, was about the big walls, that money puts up, right? That makes it very hard to share beautiful stories. A great story is often told on a page, right? But how that story comes alive for a global audience is about money. So I think there is an incredible opportunity in what you and your ancestors, right, have experienced and gone through, all cycles of life, all type of experiences, all incredible, stories out there that I think absolutely can be shared on global stage. And I think that the opportunity to do is now, because if you, or me as a Norwegian for that matter, knocks on the doors of Hollywood, right? It's like, hey, who are you? Where are you from? No, we're doing Batman #4 over here. That's where we make our money or whatever. I think that to not be not have to, you know, be have to those doors where 99.99% of people, not because the story is not good, but because it's fitting the machine. So that's a long answer to your question. I think there's absolutely incredible opportunities to to go into your past, your history, and be both proud and confident that these stories are really worth sharing on a global stage.
I think
And
yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
I was going to ask, is there any, I guess, for yourself, what do you do to give yourself confidence in your own stories and your own culture?
yeah, exactly. I think I think to start with the other side of that, um, a lot of people may have great stories, but they're discouraged by the difficulty of getting it shared, right? So again, I think that the the confidence, of course, starts with the story you want to tell, right? The passion you have for something that you find truly unique and would you like to share. That's where everything starts, right? That's the source. You have something that you want to share with other people, a story that means something to you, right? If you have that flame ignited, right, you have you're halfway there, right? But you're not there. So I would say, but have confidence in in the story that you want to tell is really everything, and can also get you across that other half until the creation part is completed. So because what is also so ironic is that many of these super expensive movies, for example, they don't have their story act together. It's amazing. So many times where you see um, big, I would say, holes in the story plots and stuff like that. And very often, what Hollywood does is they gloss over it by a lot of effects. So if you don't know how to move the story forward, you just do a lot of effects and cases and hope that the audience will be along for the journey until you have a story element that makes sense again. I'm exaggerating a little bit. So again, it all starts with the story, right? And your belief in the story that you want to tell. And that's what I'm adding, what you're now going to experience. And with the background you already have. Now, more understanding. How can my story get out using these tools that human beings have never had before? Just to add one more thing here, which is the collaborative aspect of this, right? I touched upon it already a little bit, but I think it's key. So on the one hand, if you're a painter, right, and you don't want to have 4 or 5 other painters help paint your picture. That's you as an individual artist with a unique vision, and you're painting. In movies, for example, right, as we all know, it's more than one person. It's a collaborative effort. And I think that, and I'm sure these next weeks you also essentially experience the collaborative. You already, as Gareth was saying, already started, which I think is also a very powerful thing. You, as a group, for example, right, are doing things together. So it may be one person's flame or vision or story, but it may also be something that jointly comes together. And I think the power of collaborative force is also something I think to be reckoned with. Um, Other thing, maybe I want to, if I may, um, you know, Chinese storytellers, right, is a fascinating subject matter. And I think that the reason why I'm bringing that in just for 2 seconds is that in China, traditionally, you had people come to a village with a story they have learned from their fathers and mothers, right? And they were wondering, it actually happens on the countryside even today in China, where people will come together for 2 or 3 days over a weekend. You come into a communal house, and a person that is carrying the story with him is simply talking for 8 to 10 hours per day for a couple of days. And these are stories that are thousands of years old, right? But they're actually carried on from one generation to another. The fascinating thing is, why is this so popular? Because the story holds truth in it. It holds insight, right? But it's not Hollywood. But it's wherever that storyteller is telling a compelling story that is spellbind an audience. And that comes in China from from tradition, from the past. Not 40,000 years ago, but maybe 2, 3, 4, 5,000 years, right? So I think that to be confident in the story that you want to tell is paramount, and is the foundation of everything. Whether that happens with individual creating an image, or is together to actually create, for example, visual content, it's still about the story. And the story does not need $200 million. The story is an idea. It's a spark. It's drawing from the past. And I think that's where everything starts. And I think one other thing very important is not to be dictated by what I would call this very bland Hollywood kind of superhero thing, but actually also there, think about your own narrative tool sets. Yes, you have, as Gareth, I'm sure, already talked about in terms of the 3 act stories and the 7 elements of the hero's journey. These are very important, and they're absolutely unique from culture to culture. But yet within those frameworks, right, I think there are many opportunities, not that the first thought you have in your head is to support, maybe subconsciously, to copy something that is already kind of out there, and I think, yeah, that's the way people like it, right? Also be brave in terms of essentially letting go a little bit of of a straitjacket that being looking too much into what's already out there. So Yeah, so that's maybe another thought.
Great. It's so true. But what we're learning, I think, and we're learning as a group, is that we can let go of structure too. Once we have learned structure, we can let go of structure and actually trust ourselves in the process. And sometimes the most simple things to do that, if I can share from our collective experience, has just been going out on country and seeing what happens. And then the mythological mind takes over, as we actually saw on the wall. Yes, there's references to a rainbow serpent, but that story's never been written. But that could be a myth that is as old as the Dreamtime up in the back wall about conservation of nature and the land. So I think we're all learning, and I think it's an experience, because we're living a story-led experience in our own lives, and that's really important to recognize that First Nations, ourselves, whatever culture, the title of today's cross-cultural storytelling, every culture in the world has grappled with that, but they have also made reason with that through their own mythology, by creating mythology. That mythology can only be 100 years old, as Marvel has been, and they've drawn from other mythologies, or they can be entire new universes that have been created, such as James Cameron's Avatar. But it's all about our mythic imagination and our relationship to ourselves. And I think that's just something to add, given we've talked a lot about identity. And we've had a lot of adventures, right? Even in 2 short weeks.
Yeah. And again, going back to that snake on the wall there, and going back again a little bit to North's mythology, right? Not as old as yours, but lo and behold, in Norse mythology, we saw the world, of course, as flat, and around that flat pancake was the serpent. So the serpent is also in the Norse mythology. I don't know if you knew that, but it's absolutely a key. How did that happen, right? How did that happen? Did it come from you guys? Because you know what I'm saying? So I think that the actual connectivity between different cultures, and trying to find also commonality, once you start tapping into that, that's really fascinating. Because when the Norse mythology came around, we certainly didn't have the internet, did we? And yet again, we came up with the idea of this world snake. Where did that come from, right? The big serpent that is protecting, this the place you can call Earth. Interesting.
Totally. And to share, with some of the learnings, it's like I talked about monsters a lot yesterday, and the role of monsters in stories.
Yep.
And in a similar way, the universal story of the dragon appears time and time and time. Again,
Exactly.
Has anyone ever met a dragon across these cultures? No, but we've all created one. Or in Australia, we have even the bunyip, which you may not have heard of, but that's the kind of monster that lurks in watering holes. But the dragon is a universal story of a monster. And I think there's many others.
Absolutely. And on that front, maybe I should also share a little bit of some thoughts about the Norse mythology, if you wouldn't mind, that we talked a little bit about initially, to also move into that a little bit.
Wonderful. Yes, please.
Okay. So yeah. So you could say that the Norse mythology that originated from ancient Scandinavia, is a rich and complex system of beliefs and stories shared by Vikings and other Germanic tribes. And these myths were orally transmitted and later recorded in text, like the Poetic of Edda and the Prose Edda. So that was recorded only about 900 years ago. The stories, they go back thousands of years. And central to the Norse mythology is the cosmology, divided into 9 worlds, which are connected by a tree, a world tree. That's what's very central to our mythology, called Yggdrasil. And these worlds include, and you may have recognize this from, for example, Lord of the Rings and stuff like that, but believe it or not, they're called Asgard, the home of the gods, Midgard, the world of the humans, so that's divided in that way, and others like Jotunheim, land of the giants, and Helheim, realm of the dead. So here you see already how we have divided in our mythology the world into these four major groups: uh, the Asgard, the Midgard, the Jotunheimen, and the Helheim, right? And the pantheon of Norse gods is divided into two main groups: the Aesir, including Odin, the chief god associated with wisdom, war, and death, and Thor, familiar from Hollywood, the god of thunder, and Frigg, Odin's wife and goddess of marriage, and then Vanir, associated more with fertility and prosperity. So those are the kind of the key gods, if you like, that we have in our mythology. And the key myths, they involve the creation of the world from the remains of a primordial being, Ymir, and the eventual called Ragnar. And again, I'm sure you've seen TV series with that name. And Ragnarok is a series of events, including a great battle that leads to the death of many gods, natural disasters, and submersion of the world in water. So since, yeah, a lot of water in the world, that's absolutely key, of course, to the way they saw the end of the world happening. And afterward, the world will resurface new and fertile. And the surviving and returning gods will meet, and two human survivors, think about that in the context of the Bible as well, Adam and Eve, right? Will repopulate the earth. Any, I mean, comments or questions on this, or does that make
I
it
think
a little bit?
I think you've kind of told us about a world, which is what mythologies are all about, and we can probably unpack that at a little bit more time, given that we're going to revisit certain mythologies. And I think it'd be wonderful, actually, at some stage. I mean, the film, there's a lot of work going on with the film, but then one day you will watch the film and be able to witness it. And I think one question I have just on mythology is, how do you define mythology? And in what ways do you think Norse mythology has influenced the Norwegian culture, for example?
Oh yeah, in a very big way. Let me just use a word called Christmas, right? We don't call it Christmas in Norway. We're what we can call a Christian country, but we don't call Christmas Christmas. We call it Yule. Why? Because that was the pre-Christian naming of the winter season, of the celebration that happened in the middle of the winter, right around this time. So when Norway turned into Christianity, the church, this is only about 1,000 years ago, smartly did not want to disrupt the old way, the old mythology, if you like, or actually the reference. So they simply kept the word Yule, which was very different from, let's say, from how we celebrate the Christian Christmas now. So it's impacted us so that's just a small example, maybe, but it's impacted us in many different ways. I think, for example, we are a seafaring nation, Norway is, and we've been that since way before the Vikings and sea. I mean, we have the second largest coastline in the world. So the mythology, you heard it already kind of when I kind of went through some of the key points. It's very much also connected to water. Same with Australia. A huge continent, but still surrounded by water. So the water aspect of the mythology, I think, survives for example, in novels and books that we've seen in the last couple of 100 years of heroes on the sea, conquering either incredible adverse weather or maybe sea monsters and things like that. So there is a deep connection, I believe, with, in our case, with how you have to fight the elements, very often related to either the sea or the adverse winter time, and again, how the mythology of the old heroes uh, plays into also modern novel writing and storytelling. So there is, yes, there is definitely a connection between the two.
I love what you raised there about Norse mythology and touching on the sailing mythology. We talked about that a little bit. It's almost sailing is a collective mythology across cultures. In fact,
Yeah.
a lot of the sayings we even have in our common in vernacular comes sometimes from sailing. And people get the sailing metaphors really quickly. Even here in the desert, in the middle of Australia, it couldn't be farther from a body of water. But all you guys understand that. Because
Exactly.
what happens with mythology is we share these, and then it becomes part of this collective mythology, right? That crosses different cultures. Sailing is just one of them, but space is another. We've talked a lot about a little bit about Star Wars and what George Lucas has done in creating a mythology for a modern time, which somehow we all understand. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think maybe what may be helpful, Gareth, is I would also like maybe to spend a few moments and going through just some key elements of what I think if we break down why, in our case, the Norse mythology, has something to offer in storytelling. If you wouldn't mind, I could just go through a little bit.
I will be taking notes right here.
All right. Okay.
Yes,
So
sir.
the first thing I will say is that why is this Norse mythology useful in storytelling, right? And inspire storytellers today. So that's kind of the topic of the next few moments here that I would like to share with you. So the first thing I would like to point out is that I believe it has a rich and diverse family of characters. Norse mythology is filled with a pantheon of gods, goddesses, giants, dwarfs, mythical creatures, each with distinct personalities and complex relationships. And this, I believe, this variety provides a template for creating multifaceted characters in modern storytelling. So I think there is that's in and of itself quite important. The second part I would call complex themes, right? Themes like fate versus free will, the inevitable death, Ragnarok, heroism, sacrifice, and power of knowledge and cunning, as we see in Odin's quest for wisdom. Those are central to Norse mythology. These themes be adapted to explore similar ideas in contemporary narrative. The third one is what you could call interconnected storytelling. So the Norse myths are not standalone stories, but they're interconnected, creating a rich tapestry of narrative. So this interconnectivityness can inspire modern storytelling techniques as multi-layered plot lines and extended universes. And then you have the moral ambiguity that I also think is important. Unlike many mythologies that clearly delineates gods and good and evil, Norse mythology often presents its character in a shading of gray. And that nuance is what I think makes these characters more interesting. And they often say in Hollywood that an actor, or not just in Hollywood, but around the world, or an actress really very often like characters that are not just completely good, not just completely bad, but has a little bit of both in themselves, right? It creates a more interesting characters, what we can call the shades of gray. So gods and giants, traditionally seen as good and evil, often display a mix of both traits. And this moral ambiguity is a valuable tool for creating complex narratives and characters. And so to the hero's journey that you have also talked so much about already. Many Norse tales follow a hero's journey, a common storytelling structure, right? For example, Thor's adventures contain elements like departure, trials, and return. And this structure can be a blueprint for crafting compelling story arcs. So hero's journey definitely also a part of the of how the Norse mythology is about. And then the symbolism and allegory. So myths are rich in symbols, like we talked a little bit about already, this world tree, and allegories like the Ragnarok, symbolizing the cycles of destruction and renewal. And this use of symbolism can guide storytellers in incorporating deeper meaning and themes into their narratives. And then finally, a couple of more points on the exploration of human nature and society. So Norse myths, they delve into aspects of human nature and social structures, such as the importance of honor, bravery, and the role of different societal classes. And these aspects can inform characters' development and world building in modern stories. Now, three more just very short points at the end here. So the blend of fantasy and realism, meaning while rooted in fantastical elements, Norse myths often depict realistic human emotions and conflicts, and I think that's very important. We talked about that in the start of this class, that there's also the importance of the human emotions, because that's the only way we can connect, I think, to a fantastic character, that it has human emotion and so this blend can inspire a balance of fantastic and realistic elements in storytelling, and then the adaptability across genres. So Norse mythology can be adapted into various genres, from fantasy and historical fiction, as indeed you've seen in so many Hollywood productions lately, um, historical fiction, to science fiction and modern drama, providing a versatile foundation of storytelling. So this is not just Norse mythology, but I think that once you have the mythical arc, you can tap into so many different types and variations of genres. And then finally, my final point here is the legacy and cultural impact. So the lasting impact of Norse mythology on modern culture, as Gareth was asking about a moment ago, from literature to film, it's there. It shows the power in storytelling. So understanding this influence, I believe, can help storytellers create works that resonates and inspires contemporary audiences. So in summary, I would say that Norse mythology provides really a framework of a rich narrative, complex characters, and profound themes that can guide storytellers, in crafting compelling, nuanced, and engaging stories. So that's are just some points that I think are important in connecting our mythology to the and to storytelling of today.
Fantastic. Wonderful. Please, can we thank Paul for such a great summary of the Norse mythology? It was just a wonderful exploration, which has extended on our learnings this week, and really just goes to show, heard from a true storyteller, from film to books and now new media, But shows the commonality, I think, of themes that we've learned this week, from everything from mythical creatures and monsters that we touched on just yesterday, and even created some of our own today, to heroism and the interconnected heroism in all senses, I guess, what drives a story and how universal that theme truly is. The interconnectedness of storytelling, as we've heard from him, from the rainbow serpent and the Norse symbols, and importantly, about the individual, the hero himself, the moral ambiguity, the forces of good and evil we talked about yesterday. It's so interesting, given that Hawke's fresh to this environment and in delivering an exceptional masterclass, in that these are universal themes. You've heard it from this end of the world, from the south to the very, very north. And it shows how truly universal this is. And given that this is your culture, is the oldest, this is an imagination that we all, and especially you, can tap into to tell your own stories.
I think that that sort of, thank you for that summary, Aaron, because I think essentially that a story rings true from wherever it is in the world has, I believe, a global resonance, right? Yeah. I think that's very important. That's not to say that anything you write and create and stuff like that must travel the world. I'm not saying that. I'm simply saying that, as you also maybe experienced a little bit from the mythology from my part of the world, there are, I'm sure, many similarities and also some differences, right, in terms of the mythology that you have a part of your cultural heritage. But I think that it boils down to, when people were sitting around the fire place after they have killed some animals to be able to feed their children and stuff like that, what were people doing? I'm sure they were telling stories, right? I mean, that's how we entertained, and also not just entertained, share cultural values, amongst ourselves. So this is truly unique and universal. And I think the aspect of then, or the time we're in right now, allows us to complete that rainbow serpent in an incredibly interesting way as a symbol. And I'm sure that somehow we got that serpent from you when we had that serpent that we used as protector around our universe tens of thousands of years after you came up with that. So it's really, it is both very local, right? We're individuals with stories we want to share, and yet here we are from the north to the south, and I'm looking at that rainbow circle back there on the wall all the time here. Of course, I'm looking at you too, but I'm just saying, how I'm thinking about our good old snake up here that was also circling the world. So it's just fascinating, I have to say.
Awesome. So good. Such a great sharing, and thank you for all of this. In the interest of your time and also our participants here, has some people got some questions that they'd love to ask Hawke? He's a wonderful man, a wonderful storyteller, and he is really open to any question you might ask, perhaps about the story crafting process or the journey that he has in moving through the different media of mediums of storytelling in his career.
Yeah.
I would probably ask, do you think movies are the bigger platforms to be able to tell stories these days, or do you think that's changing as well with the new media? Yeah.
I think it's going to change so much that in 10 years or something, we don't even know what happened. I think specifically, thank you for that question, by the way. I would say specifically how the game world and the narrative linear movie making, they'll come together. And I think that's the future of storytelling, if you ask me. And I could not go on for the next 10 hours on that one, because I really see just something incredible happening there. I mean, if you have something like non-playing characters, right, that you've seen in games for the last 20 years, these are the people walking in the background. They're not really active when you, as a first-person engager of some sorts, and dragons or whatever it is that you're involved with, these are the background characters, right? But they're kind of going about life, whatever. So already now in the game, from the game world point of view, you're seeing the combination of, although it's interactive, and it's me essentially as a gamer creating the story, but within a confined universe, right? As I'm exploring things, I'm failing somewhere, I'm succeeding somewhere else, right? And then you have the non-playing characters that are somewhere there in the background. Now think about this going forward a little bit, where you have the ability to combine linear storytelling and 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 gaming elements. So what I'm not talking about here, I'm not talking about games where you actually have uh, games going on for a while, and then you have essentially a linear piece, and then you continue with the game, that you see. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about merging those two elements completely, so that you actually have great stories told in a linear fashion inside of what you can call a game world, but where the idea is that the story is fixed, and the non-playing characters, they're doing their thing, maybe in an AI driven engine, because they're not so important for the story. But I see the combination of that and great filmmakers from wherever they are in the world inducing their stories into kind of a gaming platform in a linear form. So I cannot change the ending, right? That's a different form of expression. That's traditional gaming. I'm talking about I'm leaning back. I'm not leaning forwards, because I'm leaning back. I'm tired. It's afternoon, whatever. I want to see something. I want to be entertained, right? I want to dive into a story. Fine. But instead of that Netflix complete linear kind of thing, I now may have the ability to, if I want to, with my remote control, maybe to change the angles, but I cannot change the story. So there is a linear story from a storyteller embedded into live world that is going around. That's where I think storytelling. That's where I think movie making will change, or experience of movies.
Interesting, yeah? Which probably speaks to the great opportunity.
I think so. I really think so.
Actually, I've got one just further to some of the work we're going to do with Picture Tale platforms. Maybe a quick description of Bolleries, Snick Snack, some of the
Yes.
product.
Yeah. Yeah. So absolutely. So I think what's super exciting, you saw that little wonderful character that's behind you there on the poster. But essentially, in about 3 weeks' time, and you will experience that. I'm so excited about that. Even during the class, we will have a character, right? Or it can be different characters. A Let's call it an avatar or something like that, but can be, pretty human-like. Okay, and and that character you can interact with in a very interesting way. Meaning, just to simplify it, you can ask any question you like in any language, not any language, but let's say 45, 50 different languages or something like that, and get an answer to that question in whatever language you prefer. Now, that to me is a very powerful storytelling tool, if I can use it that way. The character will also have the ability to have a face that's not just a mouth going up and down, but really a character that can be used as a storyteller in an environment. You can create the character yourself, or use it from a template, and then use that character and embed it, for example, in a tour, in a geo-specific tour, maybe a 45-minute tour, in a certain area, tells a story, and then you can actually experience afterwards that you can walk around and ask that guide, if you like, whatever questions you would want. Another example of that is, let's say you have a school book, a textbook, and we have this Mr. Napoleon, this big warrior. You can say many things about him, but be that as it may, he lost at this Battle of Waterloo, as we learn in school. Now, how about you? I mean, 15% of all students have more or less learning disabilities, right? They're afraid. Even my daughter had that too. She had dyslexia, and we saw her words dancing up and down and had a very hard time learning how to read. Eventually, she mastered it, which was very happy parents when that happened. But think about a textbook, right, that has a picture of Napoleon. You hold up your smartphone, and up comes Napoleon as a 3D character. And then you say to Mr. Napoleon, give us the 3 major reasons why you lost at Waterloo. And by the way, answer me, I'm speaking English, answer me in French, because I'm also trying to learn French. And boom, there Mr. Napoleon starts talking about why he lost at Waterloo. And then maybe I add a question. So how would you go about it to try to win at Waterloo? So I'm just using that as a small example, again, of how our technology platform and the use of AI and AR in combination can actually also, in the educational system, liberate a lot of kids from the constraints of words, because many people unfortunately have, for example, reading disabilities. But even if you don't have reading disabilities, to visualize, for example, parts of education. So that's a completely different thing from, let's say, more the storytelling and the entertainment. But again, I think that the ability to use augmented reality and artificial intelligence in combination, and then anchoring that in either geospecific, like we do with this Volaris platform, geospecific storytelling, or in this Snick Snack, where the character can appear in a non-geospecific area, just anywhere you'd like. So I see those as platforms that can be very helpful in also deploying stories that you're creating. I don't know if that makes sense, but that's at least a starting point.
It's a great example of what we're going to experience in coming weeks, where we can pack some of this with some more AR. Next week, we're going to do another. We've already done one mini tour. But next week, we're going to walk around the precinct. We're in Volaris, one of Mr. Gundersen's products. We have already laid out over a year ago a sample tour. And the ambition is, in the next few weeks, over the course, to actually build a mythology in and around this precinct that is led by you and your voice, that then helps tell the stories of this precinct in its 20th year of existence. And this place was a place of learning. It's a place of culture. And it was always the vision of the founders of this entire precinct here at the foot of the McDonald's Ranges, that this be a place that we learn about the future. And so we're very much looking forward to the partnership with Picture Tale to deliver this tour, to learn together, to really embrace the incredible opportunity that exists right now to tell stories with people from the world's oldest living storytelling culture. So
yeah, thank you. And I'm also very excited to have you guide me on your tours out there. I'm looking forward to that, actually. So that's a challenge. Back to you.
Yeah, wonderful. Okay, well, it's probably a very nice place for us to wrap up today. Unless anyone's got any other burning questions, we all will meet again, of course, on our paths through this course in this program. Yep. And of course, we're looking forward to learning more together hopefully with Tommy and some animators, Picture Tale side. We've got, and together we're going to embrace this future together. So thank you let's give all a round of applause to Mr. Paul Mason. Thank you for your master.
Thank you also to you guys and girls, because I think this is a fantastic opportunity to really get to know these tool sets, and I can't wait to see. The first thing I did when I woke up early in the morning was seeing all those beautiful images that you have put together, and how diverse they are, how incredibly versatile the expression is. So this really is very promising in terms of what you're going to bring also back to us, right? And so sharing what you're going to do and create, can't wait to see it.
Great. We're looking forward to creating the future together. Thank you very much for your time. We'll be in touch again soon. And
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Awesome. Okay, so that was great. How did you guys enjoy that experience? Yeah.
I loved how you talked about like the galleries, because like you love anime and there's all these other like things like that, but you gotta think about